Good evening, everyone, and welcome to a new study of the week's portion. After a short hiatus, we are beginning with the start of the Torah. This week, we read the first portion of the book of Breishit, of Genesis, and the portion's name is Breishit. Breishit translates to in the beginning. I would like to concentrate on few topics and move around from one to the other so that you gain some knowledge about the 6 days of creation. Being that we are on Thursday, today is Thursday, I would like to share with you something unique that is particularly important for anyone who's born on Thursday. First, what did God create on Thursday? We're going to read the text. If you use the Chabad Chumash, the synagogue's version, it's on page 9, chapter 1, verse 20. I'm going to read it. The fifth day, God said, "Let the waters produce swarms of small living creatures, and let birds fly over the earth across the firmament of the skies." And God created, page 11, verse 21, God created the large sea fish, all the creeping living creatures that the waters produced in swarms, according to the species, and all the winged birds, according to the species. God saw that it was good. God blessed them, saying, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters of the sea, and let the birds multiply upon the earth." It became evening, and it became morning, the fifth day. So on the fifth day of creation, God created the birds and the fish, all the mammals, all the creatures that live in water, and all the other birds that fly over and above the earth. These are the two categories of creatures that God created on the fifth day. What's interesting is the Talmud tells us the following. I'm going to read it from the Talmud. Talmud Tractate Shabbat, I believe, says, anybody born on the fifth day of the week will have a tendency to be kind, because fish and birds were created on this day, and fish and birds do not need to work hard for their sustenance, but are fed purely by the kindness of God. According to the Talmud, Tractate Shabbat, anyone born on Thursday will have a tendency to act in kindness, to be extra kind. Just like fish and birds receive their sustenance from God's kindness, as opposed to the other creatures, that includes humans and animals who live on the face of the earth, where they have to sweat to earn a living, and animals have to go hunting before they can reach the point of consuming food. They have to go for hunt in schools, in groups, etc. Well, when it comes to fish and birds, they find it much easily because, as we are told, they are getting it much directly from God. And therefore, because God acted in extra kindness on Thursday with the creatures that he created on Thursday, therefore anybody born on Thursday will have the same tendency. The Lubavitcher Rebbe is asking, and I'm going to read the Rebbe's question. The Rebbe is asking the following simple question. The Rebbe is asking, the Talmud states that a person born on the fifth day of the week will have a tendency to be kind to kindness, since birds and fish who are fed by the kindness of God were created on that day. Elsewhere, says the Rebbe, in the Talmud, a further statement is made that Jewish people can be recognized by three signs, one of which is that they are kind-hearted. So, if all Jews are kind-hearted in any case, what is the unique quality of being born on the fifth day? being born on the fifth day is not necessarily Jewish. Anyone born on the fifth day will have the tendency to act in kindness according to Jewish tradition. As the Rebbe, Jewish people are defined by three traits. One is that they have compassion, they are very compassionate. The second is that they are kind-hearted. And the third one is that they are shy people. They are not haughty. Now let's talk about kind-hearted. If someone is born to the Jewish faith has this trait, what is added by someone born on Thursday? And therefore, the Rebbe says that these are two different types of kindness. Here is in the words of the Rebbe is the best way to describe. Clearly says the Rebbe, these two texts of the Talmud are speaking of two different forms of kindness. The inherent kind nature of the Jewish people is a function of the personalities. This is limited in the sense that a person will only extend himself to a certain point to help another. When you say you're born as a kind-hearted, it's something that you are very limited to how far you're going to act in that level of kindness. However kind-hearted a person might be, his willingness to put himself aside for another person will have its limits when stretched. If it's been stretched, the kindness will stop. In contrast, said the Rebbe, a person born on the fifth day will have a tendency to help others to the extent that he totally disregards his own personal needs and interests in a way that is somewhat reminiscent of God's boundless kindness. Someone who's born on Thursday is going to have a reflection of God's kindness, and therefore God's kindness has no limitation, it's limitless. And therefore that person will go out of his way to be kind, even above and beyond the call of duty, putting aside his own needs for the act of kindness towards others. In that way, being born on Thursday is different than anyone who is born as part of the Jewish people. However, says the Rebbe, although those born on the fifth day may be predisposed towards a greater form of kindness, they only have a tendency towards that trait which may or may not express itself. It is not an actual conscience part of their personality. Thus, there remains an advantage to the general kind nature shared by all Jews, for it is a tangible character trait which expresses itself openly. Says the Rebbe, someone who's born on Thursday has this potential to the level of kindness which is boundless, which has no limitation. But that tendency needs to come out in the open and not always happens. Where when we talk about the nature of kindness that possessed by the Jewish people, it is part of their personality, therefore it is expressed regardless and all the time. So here you go, we have a better understanding about someone who's born on Thursday versus the rest of the Jewish people. And the two types of kindness, one is going above and beyond, even putting his own personal needs aside. That's applied to someone who's born on Thursday, as opposed to the people who are born and from a Jewish part of the Jewish nation. They have the trait of kindness, but it is limited as long as it does not push my needs and my personality aside. So this is about Thursday. I want to go back to Wednesday. I hope there are no questions. If somebody has any questions, please let me know. Raise your hand. On Wednesday, we are going back to page 8. And the question that we are going to be dealing with is, when did God created the sun and the moon, the luminaries? When were they created? The description about them comes on Wednesday, but it doesn't say that he created them on Wednesday. Here it is, chapter 1, verse 14 on page 9. I am going to read the description of the luminaries of the sun and the moon's creation on Wednesday, and then share with you some commentators. On the fourth day, God said, the luminaries shall be positioned in the firmament of the sky to separate between the day and the night. They will serve as omens of bad events when there is an eclipse and will determine the time of the Jewish festivals. And the sun and moon will define the days and years. They will also act as luminaries in the firmament of the skies to shed light upon the earth, and that is what happened. And we read that God made the two large luminaries. God says, let the luminaries hang up in the sky, and the purpose is as signs of kindness or opposite of kindness, as a way to understand when to celebrate seasons and holidays, to differentiate between day and the next day, and also to provide light into the universe. The sun's purpose of providing light to the universe is the last purpose. It's almost as extra and definitely not the main point. But when did the luminaries were created? It doesn't say God created them. It says the luminaries shall be positioned in the firmament, meaning they were already created. Here is Rashi, and we will see what the Rebbe says to explain Rashi. Rashi, I'm reading on page 8 and verse 14. Rashi writes the following. Rashi, they were created on the first day. And on the fourth day, he commanded them to be suspended in the sky. Similarly, Rashi goes on to add more to it. All the creations of the skies and the earth were created on the first day, and each one was fixed in its proper place on the day that was decreed upon it, as we read in the 6 days of creation. Verse 1 of the Bible, the verse 1 is thus to be read, in the beginning of God's creation of the skies and the earth and their contents. In other words, God created according to Rashi. Let's summarize what I just read. According to Rashi, the luminaries, the light, the sun, and the moon were all created on the first day and only suspended in the skies on the fourth day. Rashi goes on to say that not only the sun and moon, but every part of the creation, the fish, the birds, the animals, man, all were created already on Sunday. When we read in the first verse, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth, and the is extra, says Rashi, it's to teach us, and the heaven and all its creatures, and the earth, which are superfluous, to teach us that all its creatures that live on earth were also created with the earth. And only God would then every day took them apart, as we will find out in a moment, each day according to what God desired. The Rebbe, this is Rashi. The Rebbe has few questions. The first is why Rashi decided to tell it to us about that. This is a revolutionary idea that everything was created already on the first day. It should have been said in the first verse, not on the 14th when we deal with the fourth day. Second is why Rashi bothers sharing that with us. How does it help us into our understanding of the text? Says the Rebbe the following. Rashi explains, I'm going to read it because I think the text explains it very well. Rashi explains that everything was created on the first day and merely fixed on the subsequent days. From this it follows that God's utterances were only made on the subsequent days where it was necessary to change various details of the creation. Those details which did not need to be changed were thus not mentioned by God in his utterances. Says the Rebbe, based on what we study from Rashi, when we read about the other days of creation, God created the ocean, God created the fish, it's only those that God needed to refine and divide them into details, which did not happen on the first day. But anything that could have been placed in its place, the way they were created, they are not mentioned in the 6 days of creation. This explains, says the Rebbe, why, for example, God did not say, let there be fire, since the nature of fire did not change after creation. This is in contrast to earth, which was mentioned on the second day and the third days, since its nature changed when it began to emerge from the water and sprout vegetation. Says the Rebbe, the earth appears in the second day of creation, and the earth appears in the third day of creation. Why? Because there were some changes that needed to take place. One is that it should emerge from the water to become dry land. And the other part, the third day, is so it should sprout vegetation to have the energy and the vitamins, the nutrition to allow for plants to grow and tree to grow on the earth. And therefore, it is mentioned in the creation. If someone were to ask you, when did God create fire? It doesn't mention, says the Rebbe. Actually, everything was created on the first day. The fact that it's not mentioned in the 6th day of creation is because it did not need any refinement or changes. That explains, by the way, people ask, when did God create angels? I don't know if anybody was asked, but you don't find in the creation angels. Some say it happens on Thursday, some say on Friday. No matter what, they were created on the first day, but they were perfect creatures, so there was no need to mention them in any of the other 6 days. In other words, when God created heaven and earth on first day and second day, he created the heaven and all its creatures and earth and all its creatures. And then he put them out and started taking them apart one at a time in 6 days. Each day, devoting himself to one section, one category. Those areas where he saw that there was a need for it to have some changes happening to it, like the earth to emerge out of the water and become dry, like the earth sprouting vegetation, that's where he said, let there be, let there change, let there create. But the creation of it happened in the first day. That's why it says, now the Rebbe's explanation, I'm going to skip the reading. The Rebbe explained, Rashi find it necessary only on the 4th day, because you read that God says, let the luminaries shall be positioned in the firmament. You don't write that God says, let there be lights. And therefore Rashi concluded that all the creation, including the luminaries, had to have been created on the first day, and only about hanging them on the skies to serve a purpose, to define days and nights, to define seasons, to define holidays, to know when the eclipse happened, which according to Jewish tradition, it's the opposite of a blessing. It therefore needs to be hanging up in the skies. And that's why we read about luminaries. However, fire, as I mentioned, in addition, angels, for example, you won't find them in the creation because there was no refinement, there was no changes that needed. For the shortness of time, I want to go on to show with you on page 15, the conclusion of creation. We read, we read about 6 days of creation, and then there is something very peculiar about the end of the creation. I'm going to read the text and then try to share with you some commentators as to the purpose of creation. On the 7th, I'm reading on verse 31, the conclusion of Friday, and then moving on to the next text, to the Shabbat. verse 31, chapter 1, it's on page 13, reads the following. God saw everything that he had made, and look, it was very good. It became evening, it became morning, the sixth day. So God concluded everything he did on the sixth day. Now let's read the seventh day. This is part of the Kiddush we recite every Friday night, so it should be a familiar text. The skies, the earth, and all the numerous components were completed. On the seventh day, God completed his work that he had made. On the seventh day, he rested from all his work that he had done. Something doesn't make sense. We are just read in verse 31, before we move to chapter 2, verse 1, we read that God says clearly, God saw everything he had made, and look, it was very good. There was evening, there was morning, Friday. Friday ended, there is no more creation. But yet we read on verse 2, on the seventh day, God completed his work that he has made. The question that comes that all the commentators have bothered, what do you mean on the seventh day completed the work? He completed the work on the sixth day, not on the seventh day. The seventh day was a day of rest. Here are some commentators who will see how far we can go. According to Rashi, Rashi brings two explanations. Rabbi Shimon said, a man of flesh and blood who cannot judge his times and his moments must add sometimes from the week to Shabbat. God, who can judge his times and his moments, entered a hairbreadth into Shabbat, and it appeared as if he completed his work on that day. That's the first. Rabbi Shimon in the Talmud tells us that as human beings, we cannot know the exact split second between one day to the other. And therefore, when we need to rest on Shabbat, we're not allowed to wait for Shabbat to arrive, for sunset. We need to make it a little bit earlier, lest we have come to the point of violating Shabbat. But God knows exactly split seconds. He can split a moment or a split second to nanosecond and nanoseconds. And therefore, he's completed his work on Friday, and on Shabbat he rested. But it looks to the human as if God entered into Shabbat and completed it on Shabbat, which is not true. That's Rabbi Shimon. In other words, the reason the text tells us that God completed on Shabbat is because to us it looks like as God completed on Shabbat, but in reality, God completed it on Friday, but until the very last second of Friday, he continued being busy with the creation. The second explanation of Rabbi Shimon, another explanation Rashi brings, what was the world lacking? Rest. When Shabbat came, rest came, the work was completed and finished. Rashi says God completed the actual labor on Friday. However, there was one part that needed to be added to the creation, which is rest. Rest is not mentioned in any of the 6 days of creation. When do we actually rest? On Shabbat. And therefore, only when rest was added to the creation, now the entire creation was completed. So we read there was evening, there was morning, one day, and God completed the work, and he saw was very good. And then we read that on the seventh day, God completed his work that he has made. On the seventh day, he rested from all his work that he had done. And therefore, on the seventh day, it's actual completion of the week of the creation without any labor done on Shabbat. Because on Shabbat, he rested, and the rest completed the work. Now, there were other people, the other rabbis are debating it and discussing. We don't have the time. I just want to, and it's very fascinating about what had to actually, why Rashi needed both explanation. If Rashi brings two, it means that one is not a perfect answer. And this is really a real problem, a difficulty to explain similarly a contradiction between two verses. But there is one point that the Rebbe shares with us, which to me is very, very powerful, and I want to show it to you. If you have the Chumash that I'm starting from, on page 15, you have the last word. The Rebbe is asking a simple question. According to the first answer, God worked in the creation for 6 days, and on Friday, the sixth day, he worked all the way till the end of the day, and he stopped working only when Shabbat fell upon the earth. Why shouldn't he take a break and Friday afternoon stop the work? Why did they need to do it all the way so that it seems to us as if he worked on Shabbat? The Rebbe says, why did God deem it necessary to continue walking all the way up to Shabbat, and even to extend his walk by a hairbreadth into Shabbat? What was gained by the feat of precision? What's the big deal that God showing us that he can be so precise that he can walk all the way till a hairbreadth of that 7th day? God could have done that, stopped that a little earlier. Says the Rebbe, God was teaching a lesson to mankind about the preciousness of time. So long as a person has the opportunity to carry out his divinely ordained mission in this world, he should utilize every moment in order to utilize its fullest potential, pushing every allocation of time to its almost utmost limits. Says the Rebbe, it comes to show us that if I have a mission, I have a job, I have any assignment, I must be doing it all the way without taking shortcuts. And therefore, if God gave me a day, it should be filled with action and with good deeds. Otherwise, time is wasted and it's much more valuable than anything else that we have, any other commodity. No other commodity can be, we can gain back except time. And therefore, God walked in 6 days of creation all the way till Shabbat to a hairbreadth of the next day. So much so that for us as humans, it looks like that God walked on Shabbat, and on the 7th day, he completed his work. Alternatively, a person might bemoan the fact that we're living in such a spiritually desensitized generation. Gone are the days of the prophets and the Talmudic sages when the Jewish people served God with the utmost fervor. What could our lowly generation possibly achieve beyond the accomplishments of our ancestors? Now that he's talking in general, some people may think, what good am I doing in this universe? At the time of the prophets, the sages, they were very great accomplishers. I cannot do anything. What can we do to contribute in this God's universe? The answer to this question can be derived from God's conduct when creating the world. Just like we see that every moment was precious to God, to the extent that he continued walking to the very last opportunity. Likewise, the final walk of the very last generation is of paramount importance. Says the Rebbe, God walked on Friday. He could have finished in the afternoon, but he continued walking until he got to the hairbreadth of Shabbat, meaning there is not one split second of Friday in which he wasn't busy creating. It comes to teach us that in the universe, as a 6,000 years of universe that God created, every single moment and every single human being has a purpose and must accomplish the purpose without comparing to previous generations and previous days and previous millennia, because the reason we are here is for a purpose. If God gave us a moment, if God gave us an hour, if God gave us a talent, it must be utilized to the utmost. And that's why God created, in the 6th day of creation, we read that God continued up until the very last moment. And with that, I would like to conclude